"We're not sure Jack will play on the PGA Tour, Jim." That statement was made to my father from Jack Nicklaus's father, Charlie Nicklaus, on June 12th, 1960. That story and more behind-the-scenes stories today on another edition of the ultimate Backstage Pass to Sports. Hi, I'm Bob Burris, and today we're going to talk about what's known as the greatest championship ever. I'm referring to the 1960 U.S. Open Golf Championship. The USGA, which is the governing body of the Open Championships, awarded Denver, Colorado the 1960 U.S. Open, and specifically to the host club of Cherry Hills Country Club. And what a tournament it was. It had a nail-biting finish with Arnold Palmer coming from 7 shots back to win. It had the end of the Ben Hogan era and the emergence of a chubby-faced amateur, Jack William Nicklaus from Columbus, Ohio. But before we get into that, let's talk about the fact that to put a tournament on like that takes a lot of volunteers and a lot of help, and most of the help is free. Now, you usually need about 2,000 volunteers, but the 1 or 2 positions that was paid was they needed a publicity director. Well, my father, Jim Burris, former sports writer and public relations director in baseball, was available. And if anybody knew my dad, they would know that golf was a close second to my father in things that he loved. And his hero in baseball was Joe DiMaggio, but his hero in golf was Ben Hogan. And Hogan was going to play in this golf tournament. So it was an easy answer for my father to say yes to this opportunity, because this was going to put him, a venue, I should say, where he is going to write press releases, get to know all the players. If an Arnold Palmer or a Gary Player wanted to fly in and play a practice round, it was my dad's job to either play with them or get 3 other people, namely sports writers, to play with them. So a dream job. Now in those days, and ardent golf fans will know this, the US Open was played in 3 days, not 4. So the first 36 holes were played on Thursday and Friday, with the cut being made, and then the last 36 holes was played on Saturday. They have to play twice on Saturday. After the second round, both Jack Nicklaus and Ben Hogan were 2 shots back of the leader, Mike Suchak. But the story that evening wasn't about Suchak leading the tournament. It was about Hogan and Nicklaus both playing marvelously. But more than that, it was the fact that all the writers were saying was that there is no chance that Hogan will win tomorrow. And wouldn't it be great to see the amateur win? So that story was circulating in the press room, and it needed a response. So my father had heard all these rumors and says, well, why don't you think Hogan can win? And to a T, they all said, well, you know, Ben had that bad car accident in 1949, and, you know, his legs were badly broken, and we just don't think that he can play 36 holes in one day in the Colorado heat and walking 36 holes. So it needed a response, and, you know, sometimes they say, shoot the messenger. Well, the messenger in this case was my dad, Jim Burris, and Jim had to go find Hogan and tell him this. Now, during the week of the tournament, my dad had me out to the tournament and taken me on the driving range where he and Ben Hogan had spent quite a bit of time together. And not very many people can say that Hogan was very cordial to them because he was so focused on his game. But I remember distinctly Ben Hogan saying to my dad, please call me Ben, Jim, not Mr. Hogan. So they had somewhat of a relationship, but now my father has to go tell Ben that the rumor in the press box is, and the story in the press box is, that you're never going to be able to make it through the 36 holes tomorrow. So Hogan, a man of very few words and a very intimidating figure, looked at Jim for about 30 seconds, and those cold blue, steely gray eyes just burnt a hole, as my father said, in him. And Hogan then took a long drag off his cigarette and looked at Jim and said, Jim, I'm going to tell you something, but only if you promise you'll get it into the paper tomorrow. My dad said, yes, Mr. Hogan, whatever you say, I'll do whatever it takes. He said, you can look it up. Anytime a tournament has forced us to play 2 rounds of golf in the same day, I have always played the second 18 holes better. So with that information, Jim scurried back to the press room and gave that news to the press. And the next morning, that was the story. They made no mention hardly of Mike Suchak leading the tournament. It was all about this and Hogan. So my dad, the PR man, had kind of done his job, I guess you'd say. So on the first tee, before Hogan teed off, he saw my father in the grandstand. And he looked over at Jim and he tipped his hat to Jim, which meant, "Thanks, Jim, for getting it in the paper. Good job." Now, Hogan and Nicklaus are paired together in a twosome, and they're matching shot for shot for shot. And that's when my father said to Jack's father, "Charlie, your son just is an amazing player. You know, he's going to be a tremendous professional." To which Charlie Nicklaus said, "Well, Jim, we're not really sure that Jack's going to play pro." And my dad said, "Why not?" He said, "He's playing this machine, Ben Hogan, and Hogan's not speaking to him. He's not being cordial to him. He's just not paying any attention to him. Oh, and your son doesn't seem fazed by this at all. The mental toughness that your son has is for sure going to be a winner out there." He said, "Well, Jack's in the insurance business, Jim, back in Columbus, and everybody wants to play with Jack. And every time Jack goes out and plays, he signs 3 guys up for insurance policies. And we just don't think that he can make more money on the PGA Tour than that." So a little known story that not a whole lot of people know. Now, 37 years later, as life and history have a way of repeating itself, I am living in Sarasota, Florida, and running a senior PGA golf tournament. And we have every player in the field that is of any name at all. Gary Player, Lee Trevino, Arnold Palmer, anybody you can name we have, but the one person we don't have is Jack Nicklaus. And mainly that's because Jack at that time was 57 years old and wasn't really interested in playing on the senior tour because, gosh, for the last 30 years, he'd been beating these guys' brains out for 30 years. What more does he have to prove? But it became a personal challenge to me, and I so wanted to meet Jack Nicklaus and relay this story that his father and my father had. So it kind of became an obsession to me, and I mean, I wore out the Nicklaus Company phones, calling them every other day, writing letters, even asking the PGA Tour commissioner to make a call on our behalf to try to get Jack, and nothing was working. So I'm out of aces. I have no more rabbits in my hat. But then I overheard someone talking about the fact that there's a family in Sarasota by the name of O'Leary that has some kind of a connection to the Nicklauses. So because there was no internet, we immediately went to the phone book, and there's only 1,000 O'Learys in South Florida. So one by one, we tried to eliminate, and we made more phone calls, and we found out that it was a Bill O'Leary that was related to Jack Nicklaus, and he was actually Jack's son-in-law, which means that Bill O'Leary was married to Jack's only daughter, Nan. So kind of a eureka moment for me. We got a hold of Nan, and I expressed my plight and my desire. Lo and behold, I would have to think that Nan called her mother, Barbara Nicklaus, who is truly the top woman that ever was in golf as a person. And I just have a sneaky suspicion that when I got the phone call at 4:45 on Friday, with 15 minutes before Jack had to make his commitment, I think Barbara Nicklaus had a little bit to do with that. But that call came from Scott Tolley from the Nicklaus Company saying Jack had committed to play. So that gave us really 15 or 20 minutes to get on the phone and release that news to the press. And I have to tell you, in moments, all 4 lines that we had going lit up like a Christmas tree, and we took phone orders for ticket sales till 10 p.m. that night. That's how much of an impact Jack's presence was. So now Jack is at the tournament, and I've got a chance now because I am the guy that can get inside the ropes. And I come up to Jack and I say, "Mr. Nicklaus, I'm Bob Burris. I'm the tournament director here." And he says, "Yeah, Bob." He says, "Hey, thanks for inviting me." I said, "Jack, I didn't invite you. I begged." I begged him, and I said, "But I really just wanted to tell you about a story that you may or may not know about between your father and my father." And Jack looked at me like he didn't know the story. And I relayed the fact that his dad had told my dad that they didn't think you were going to make enough money in the professional golf world than you were selling insurance. And Jack just gave me this kind of wry little smile and kind of winked at me, and he said, "Well, Bob, we made the right decision, didn't we?" Yes, Jack, you made the right decision. 117 wins, 18 major championships, 19 runners-up in championships. Nobody's done that. And not to mention the gobs of money that you did make, but you have truly made the right decision. So lastly, and the other behind-the-scenes story is this. I have never seen this in print, but because my father followed Jack Nicklaus for all 4 rounds, and Ben Hogan for all 4 rounds of the U.S. Open, my father charted every shot that Hogan took. And although the statistic is mind-blowing, the amazing number that I'm going to give you is that for 43 straight holes, Hogan either putted with a putter for birdie or eagle. Now, they weren't keeping statistics like that back in those days, but that doesn't mean he hit 43 greens in a row. That means that he had hit the ball close enough he didn't have to use anything but a putter. And it has just amazed me forever that that statistic has never been made light of. So folks, thanks for watching. This was a great trip down memory lane for me, and I hope you've enjoyed it. And we'll see you next time for the next edition of the ultimate Backstage Pass to Sports.